Taneytown Planning Commission, please come to order. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. Would you please stand to the pledge of the flag?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let the record reflect the members that are here this evening. We'll defer approval of the February 26 minutes until next month, since we don't have them in our packet. So moving on to delegation and action items. Presentation of final subdivision plan, Meadowbrook Phase 5. Jim, you want to start us off? Then we'll go on with...
Sure. This shouldn't be anything too new for you. It's based on the preliminary plan that was approved many years ago. And more recently, in April 2017, we came with a concept to revise the intersection of O'Brien and Bowie Mill from a four-way intersection to a T intersection where Bowie Mill will end at O'Brien, or O'Brien will end at Bowie Mill, because the property immediately to the north, Meads Crossing, is going to be a forest conservation area there. So there's no point in having a little stub road dead end at Meads Crossing. So you guys saw the concept for the change in April 2017, and consensus at that point was to go ahead and make that official and change the construction drawings. So that's really what you're going to see tonight is red line construction drawings to show that revised intersection and the additional of one building lot that was able to be worked in with not having that street. And then of course the plats that go along with section 5. So that's really just kind of a quick nutshell of what you're going to be seeing tonight, and or what was in your packet. And developers here to field questions or elaborate as needed.
Okay, so anyone have any questions, or you guys have anything you wanted to add to what Jim said? I mean, we're pretty much all on the same page.
Okay, Martin Rick with Carroll Land Services. We're just here if there's any questions. Everybody has the red line. I don't think there's any major changes. We just added the one lot, so I think tonight was presentation, but we'd also like to ask if we could get approval contingent upon Jim's approval. Yeah, I think he got something from CDM already.
Yeah, CDM has reviewed. They didn't have any comments on it. I haven't heard back from the health department, and we do need to run it by Taneytown Fire Company just for the APFO. I don't anticipate hearing anything back from the fire company, but we typically give them the opportunity to comment on it before we approve.
So in that case, we're not looking for an approval tonight on anything, right?
It was on the agenda just for presentation, anticipating the letters to come in, between now and next month. But as Martin said, we did already receive CDM Smith's approval.
Okay. Anyone have any questions? Holly, George?
No, I'm satisfied.
Okay, we're good. If there's no action to be taken, we're fine.
So this will come back next month then? Is that the story for approval?
For final approval, right. Correct on that, Jim, right?
Right. I mean, you can certainly entertain conditional approval if you want to. That's
You
your
were asking for
choice.
approval tonight, right?
I just asked if it was possible. That just saves us coming back to commission. Other than that, we still can't go there until Jim says it's approved.
Well, the only thing... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just do not give conditionals. Is there any issue with delays for next month as far as us?
Although that it may save us a couple of weeks of time, because what we want to do is we're going to record it as soon as we can and then start construction on 28 of the 43 lots. And the sooner we can get started, the better.
Jim, do you anticipate any time for the health department? That would be the...
It sounds like Barton's heard back from the health department. I just haven't heard anything from them yet. I wouldn't anticipate any any concerns. It's just adding one additional building lot, and the usual comment is going to be it's acceptable on city water and sewer.
Why do we have to go another month?
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
We had
because we
everything
don't have
here.
approval,
Huh?
because we don't have approval from all the commissions yet. All the departments.
Right, I think at this point for phase 5, it's gonna be boilerplate anyway,
I agree, but
right? I mean, what all approvals are we waiting for? What contingencies are there?
There's very limited distribution at the county, just development review and then routing through the health department through the county. CDM Smith and myself and fire department's the only outside of the city review for our usual distribution, because we do water, sewer, roads. We're not doing a traffic study for it, so there's not a whole lot for us to look at other than making sure all the notes and things are okay on the plat. So that's and I'm sure CLSI didn't change anything from phase 4.
I just don't like to give continuous.
So I don't expect any landmines.
So you're expecting what, within the next maybe 2 weeks or longer, or what?
I would think in the next couple weeks.
Okay, so what's the wish of the commission?
I say go ahead with it.
I say go ahead too and let it in the hands of
listen-
Jim.
I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve it.
Contingency on the approvals, right?
Hinging on Jim's approval
That's what
of
we just
everything
said.
that comes in. I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Anything from the county?
Don't surprise her like that.
I want to make sure she was in
She
attendance.
scares easily.
All right, all those in favor of the motion for contingency approval, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
Thank you very much.
There you go. Enjoy your night.
See you.
Yep. Okay, next, I guess, is Clara, a review of Chapter 3 and 4, Carroll County Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan. Request for approval for what?
For chapters 3 and 4. We're just looking for, I think Jim distributed the Taneytown portion. So we were just asking that you look over it. Jim already looked over it for me, but I wanted to know if y'all had any changes, and then we were looking for approval. It went before, it was distributed to Carroll County Planning Commission in early March, and they looked over it. I think it was March 17th, and then they're looking for, we're looking for approval from them in April. So I didn't know if y'all had any changes or you wanted to add anything to it. If not, then we were just looking for acceptance of the text.
It's inconsistent with what we have in here, right?
And this is similar to the way we do the water and sewer master plan, as far as the commission voting on the Taneytown portions of the plan, and obviously that's going to be merged in with all the other municipalities in the county at large. But we're just, giving our approval for those things that speak to the Taneytown portions of the plan. So we did. Claire did bring up something that I could not answer that we had in our 2010 plan, and that was some descriptions of like high-intensity recreational and environmental recreation, low-intensity recreation, and we hadn't defined those terms in the 2010 plan. And we shared with what we thought the previous city manager had intended with that, but we hadn't thought at the time to define all those terms. So I know the county's kind of working on some terminology there as well, so we may revisit that chapter of the comp plan. We've talked about the text, but we didn't really look at the maps to see those terms defined on the maps, so we probably want to take another look back at that. So there's a little, semantics issue between what was on the comp plan and just not being certain of exactly what some of those terms were on the map. But overall, it conforms to the 2010 plan, and a lot of the trails that are mentioned in the bike and pedestrian plan were in the 2010 plan. That's where a lot of them came from. So as far as staff review goes, and I've shared it with Bob Mitchell, our Parks and Rec director, and he didn't have any additions or corrections to make to it. So, yeah, so staff-wise, we're good with it.
Okay. So I'll start out with asking, is there a motion?
Well, who knows if these trails and bicycle places will ever turn out this way? And when?
Well, but if you don't have a plan for it, it never will.
Right. So,
The sidewalk schedule, that's quite extensive. Someone spent a lot of time on that.
Yeah,
Well, we are missing a lot of sidewalks.
Oh, I know we are. I know we are.
You want to
and
make
actually, we have some of those issues covered in our capital plan too.
So, and some of the sidewalks that are lacking, that are pointed out in there, are will be challenging to construct. There are some slope issues and things like that that make it very difficult in some of those areas where we would love to have sidewalks, but they will be challenging to build.
Well, they were grandfathered in not to have walks.
I mean, some of those properties developed before we required sidewalks every
Yeah,
place.
right.
Yeah, and those, those will be challenging. I mean, ultimately, we certainly would love to see a complete sidewalk network without, having to have people walk out in the street for 100 yards where the sidewalk ends. But it's, it's a long road to get there.
So you said, who else on staff has approved what this said? I guess you said Bob?
Yeah.
Bob Mitchell did, okay, because I see a lot of it includes some park stuff,
Right,
so,
right.
okay.
Yeah, and Bob was also involved in reviewing the map that we saw several months ago with the planned bike routes and everything. So he weighed in on those as well.
Okay. So you want to get a motion on the floor?
Make a motion to approve the pedestrian master plan for the bike.
Is there a second?
I'll second that too.
Any further discussion? Any more comments?
No, I mean, this will be back before you when like the whole document is complete, so you can look over it again. So this isn't the last time you're gonna see it.
And just to emphasize, we're focusing on chapters 3 and 4 at this point.
Okay, right.
So let me just understand exactly what this does. I mean, is this just simply stating that we have plans of putting in sidewalks and trails? Is that really all this is doing?
I mean, this is going to be the Taneytown portion of the countywide bike and pedestrian plan.
Right.
So this is saying, this is what we want, this is our goal. This is, the connectivity and the recreational paths that we want to pursue.
Right.
Just, essentially a comprehensive plan for cycling and pedestrians. So I guess you'd call it a functional plan as opposed to an overall comprehensive plan.
But this doesn't give us
This does not
any...
obligate us to a
Well, right.
construction schedule or
Right, but at
anything.
the same time, is this something where the county looks at it from time to time and says, hey, we could provide some funding for this plan because it's as part of our comprehensive plan, or it's just one of those here?
Right. Well, it's consistent with our,
Well, and I understand that, but I mean, the county wants this information from us, which I get. I'm just wondering, is there actually a benefit to us? I mean, are they gonna look at it and say, okay, there's a plan that we could help you with? Or are they gonna be knocking down our door in a year and say, you haven't done anything with your plan, what are you gonna do?
Well, this is the first and feel free to jump in and correct me if I misspeak for anything for the county, but this is the first bicycle pedestrian plan that the county has developed.
Right.
Assuming that this will kind of follow suit of other functional plans, should we apply for grant funding for a trail project, part of that application is probably going to include that it is incorporated within the county master plan.
Okay.
So if it's not in the county master plan, we essentially lose points in our rating, on that grant application.
Right.
So since there is going to be this bike and pedestrian plan, we want to make sure that we get anything we think we want to build in here so that when grant opportunities do come before us, and there has been in recent years bicycle trail money that has been unspent. So money is available for trails like this, but typically we've seen that the couple times Bob and I have gone to grant workshops, the deadline, for application between the workshop and the application deadline was such that we were not able to put together a plan. And of course, I don't know, I don't have a lot of detail as to what the Parks and Rec Advisory Board works on, but at this point I don't think that they've focused on developing concept plans for the trails beyond just what we see on the map. But ultimately, we'd like to be able to develop the trails, and some of it's funding that we need to budget for those capital projects to develop it, and that's going to start with engineering and I'm digressing a little bit, but so I don't know that the county's going to come back to us and say, oh, we've got $10,000 to do this section of sidewalk or this section of trail.
Right.
But it will be important to have these things in there so that we can pursue funding when those opportunities arise.
A few years back, we were give that for Roberts Mill Road and didn't use it.
Right.
Didn't use it at all.
Right, and that was a Safe Routes to School grant that
Right.
we ended up having to decline because we weren't able to move it forward quickly enough.
George had a question.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up a question, Jim. On the sidewalks, Carroll Heights, Roberts Mill to George Street, do we know if Dan Breath ever wrote in his deeds that they would never have to have a sidewalk there? I understood he put that in all his deeds there, that you never have to have a sidewalk.
I don't believe that would ever happen. That you'd never have to have.
Huh?
That is very possible because I have
Well,
reviewed.
that was a big issue.
You may be right about that.
I'm
I
just
don't
raising the question.
Yeah, I don't remember that specifically, but I have reviewed deeds in Breath's edition, and they were very detailed to the extent that they said who could and who could not live in that community.
Yep.
So there very well may have been some other prohibitive language that really does not pass muster today.
Bob wouldn't even know about that.
So, yeah, I mean, we could go back and do some research on it.
Well, I'm just raising the question.
Yeah.
No
Okay.
no deal.
We have a motion, so all those in favor of that motion for approval for the bike trail and pedestrian master plan, chapter 3 and 4, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, I guess we'll go right into your report.
Ready? I talked about the first couple things with Meadowbrook and the bike pedestrian plan. And next in my report, I was talking a little bit about the Hitchman site plan, the LMP Enterprises plan. The preliminary plan was included in your packets, so if anybody does have comments about anything on that plan, please feel free to share them and we can pass them on even though they're not here to officially, formally present it this evening. They did run into some stormwater planning issues. The equipment that was there last month that some folks had seen was there for the test pitting for stormwater. And that did not go so well. I don't really know the technical reasons for what did or didn't work, but they ended up having to revise the lot a little bit because of having to shift the stormwater stuff a little bit. The plan's already been submitted to the county agencies for review. We've gotten a couple comment letters. I put a couple extra letters that have come in since the packets went out at the table there. But one, I guess, pretty significant comment came from State Highway Administration regarding the existing entrance to the Hitchman. And that comment letter, I think, was in your packet. So Department of Transportation is referring them to basically look at the manual for a commercial two-way entrance detail, and well, they provided a copy of it, and they're expecting the Hitchman to revise the entrance to fit the current spec. Obviously, the developer's not thrilled with that idea, and we have had instances in the past where the city has spoken on behalf of the development project to try to get State Highway to ease up on some of those requirements. You know, we've had an issue with FlowServe a few years back where State Highway was going to require a bike lane that was going to require relocation of utility poles, and the city weighed in, asking State Highway for a more lenient ruling on that. I don't know if we want to weigh in on that on behalf of the Hitchman, or if you guys feel one way or the other about the driveway entrance. You know, from my perspective, the additional paved area is not going to have a significant impact on their trip generation, you know, in terms of more traffic coming in and out of the site. You know, hopefully there will be some additional traffic because they're obviously growing the business and having more product to display. But I don't think it's going to be a measurable impact in terms of anything we would see on a traffic study.
What about a sidewalk? I didn't see anything, sidewalk on the drawing.
Right. And that's,
State highway.
right, that, again, we're talking about a state highway as opposed to a city street. Now, something that we certainly could request would be, you know, state highway may not require a sidewalk or may not even be supportive of a sidewalk at this point in time, but we may want to ask for at least an easement to be depicted on the plan and deeded to us in the event that we either have funding available in the future or state highway changes the position on, you know, on a sidewalk for that stretch of road. But, you know, we've run into something like this previously with Antrim Boulevard when it was a county street and the county did not want sidewalks within the right-of-way. But eventually that became a city street and we did want sidewalks. And now
How are we
we're
going
trying
to
to
get
play
people
catch
out to
up.
Bowling Park?
Well, hopefully they will take that trail that's depicted in the bike and pedestrian master plan.
Are those sidewalks in our master plan?
You don't get sidewalks now, you're not gonna get them.
That's right. I just noticed it wasn't there, so,
Well, this only lists Blue Ridge Avenue to Hitchman,
yeah.
nothing past that.
What is the state, what kind of an entrance are they wanting there?
What was it, a commercial?
That's the egress
two-way?
and stuff, yeah.
A two-way, yeah.
Did they give some details or anything of what they
They
want?
did provide
On the drawing.
they did provide the, basically the specification for that. And I don't have in front of me the radius and the width and everything like that, but they provided basically a plate from the specification manual.
Just width and things like that?
Yeah, a technical drawing that specifies all the state highway requirements for a commercial entrance.
Is it wider than what they have out there now?
Oh, yeah,
It is?
I hope so.
it would have to be.
Yes.
It is, and I think that there are, you know, specific curb radiuses or radii, and the angle, I think, has to be more of a 90-degree angle than what's there now. So it would
And
entail-
probably some curbing.
I'm surprised they didn't ask for a turning lane. I mean, that's what I expected them to ask for, but,
Well, I would do it, it's not gonna be any bigger than it is now, is it?
well, I understand.
Huh?
I understand that. But at the
Well, I
same
would do
time,
that.
they're always trying to get people out of traffic, especially 194 where it gets quite congested at times. And you have that blind turn coming around. But I don't think state highway is asking for a whole lot. I mean, it's bring it up to snuff, but that's my opinion.
It looked like curb and gutter according to plan.
I would think a
What?
turn lane would be way overkill.
Oh, no, and like I said, I'm just
But
surprised they didn't
widening
ask for it.
Widening and repairing the driveway would be a must.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't pay enough of attention to that to see that it wasn't, but it should have been.
Moving to another issue there. Is the pond going to be a wet pond or a dry pond? I guess my question is, are they going to be required to put a fence around it? Just because of the, being right next to to a residential area?
I was out there again tonight, boy, it's terrible back there. That cul-de-sac. I feel sorry for those people. I feel sorry for those people.
Just mention these because these may be things that they may want to look at before they present anything else to us.
Well, they are still depicting a fence along the perimeter of the property.
So that's 6 foot, just that one, but only on one side, next to the paper alley.
But, right, I mean, they're not depicting a fence adjacent between the parking lot and the stormwater area. But we're looking at, a 4% slope. With only, the filter media is at 484 feet.
I guess my concern was, is it going to hold water?
87, so we're looking at 3 feet at a 4% slope on the one side. It is steeper on the other side, though. It's not a, I mean, during storm events, it will fill with water and then be attenuated over time. So there will be instances after a rain where there is standing water in there, but it's not designed to be a wet pond that holds water all the time.
Anyone else have any questions? We'll continue on, Jim.
Just scribble this down real quick. Okay. Okay, so as far as the Hitchman goes, do we want to ask them to add an easement for a sidewalk? Do we want, I mean, that was one of the things that came up here. Do we want to see a sidewalk and see if SHA is okay with that, or?
You talk along the highway, is that it?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm giving them the right feedback.
Well, I'd be satisfied just for the easement. How about the rest of you?
You satisfied with what?
An easement for the sidewalk?
Why an easement?
Because for right now, the sidewalk won't go anywhere.
When would you use the easement?
When we decided it was necessary to put the sidewalk in, or when the town would decide.
Well,
That there's isn't that lot down below there? Wasn't there a for sale sign there?
yeah, there
In
is,
that wetland?
yes.
Yeah, there's a for sale sign down in there.
I mean, it looks like, even looking at at the master plan, we're planning on a sidewalk from Blue Ridge and down. There's already a sidewalk in front of, the one building from Cambridge. There's already one in front of I guess it's a plumbing business now. So we have it on that side of the road. I would think we would just continue that sidewalk on that side, or are we looking to put it on both sides of the road?
The west side, I guess, is where we envision the trail going up to Bollinger Park and the Garrett property that we purchased. That side has substantially more floodplain area than the east side of 194 does. So I don't know the likelihood of development on that side of the road as you head north, because the property that's for sale only has a small portion along the road that's outside of the 100-year floodplain. And the property adjacent to that, the Stapleton farm, that's the first farm on Fringer Road, as you could continue north, that farm goes all the way out to 194, kind of across from where the Meadowbrook entrance is, Keenan Street. That's also floodplain, so it's unlikely that we're going to see development there to, prompt a sidewalk being built on that area.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of water down in there many a time.
Yeah. So I would expect that, the connectivity up to the park on that side of the road would be through more of a hike bike trail, rather than a sidewalk along the road. But again, that may be many years from now.
It would sure take some doing to put a sidewalk along that road.
See, I don't think we should look for a sidewalk there. Just, I mean, if you're thinking of safety issues, trying to keep pedestrians out of that nightmare, 'cause you have Pennsylvania drivers, they don't know what they're doing half the time, so.
I just don't, I'd want to look at that a little closer because I'm not sure you could even put a sidewalk down that road.
Well, you can
You
do
can
anything.
sidewalk anywhere you
The
want.
thing is, if we don't ask for an easement
Feasible.
now, we won't have a chance later on.
That's a valid point.
So if you put the easement in now, it's there for future if we need it.
Okay.
Well, I give up.
We've done that before.
Right.
I forget the lady that had the subdivision out there that didn't subdivide.
Trevanion Road.
Kraus.
Kraus.
Yeah.
We got an easement across
Yeah.
the property and.
Yeah.
If it never happens, it never happens, but it's there.
Okay, I'll go on with an easement.
And I guess just getting one more thing on that point, the Roberts Mill Road sidewalk grant was mentioned a little earlier. If we'd had an easement
Right.
What
within
width?
which we could do that work,
Yeah.
we would have had the sidewalk, because in that case, we had the funding to construct it, but we didn't have an easement or a right-of-way in which to put it. So at least if we have an easement, if funding does become available and it's not something that's prohibitive, engineering-wise or construction-wise, I think there are some slope issues around this site that make it difficult.
Especially since that house comes right up basically to the road.
And
They have the
there's-
retaining
and
wall.
as you go farther north, there's some slope issue, along the front of the site too. And yes, you can build it wherever. It's all, how much money you want to spend to do it.
Right.
I mean, you can always do retaining walls and things like that, but it makes it a little more prohibitive to move forward.
Well, I think the consensus is we'd like to see an easement.
Yeah.
And as far as the entrance goes,
What
It is
the
what it
state
is.
requires is what we should go with.
Right.
alrighty. Okay, next thing I had on my report was the barn that's been converted to a dwelling at 61 Frederick Street, on the left-hand side as you're heading out of town. I don't recall if we talked about this officially at a previous meeting. I know there have been some conversations with individual commission members, and you may have seen some some advertising for the tannery barn, which is what they're calling it at this point. The initial intent for the site was that it was going to be a bed and breakfast and event venue, kind of a smaller scale, but similar, I guess, to what Antrim does. Yeah, they do a lot of wedding receptions and special events on the grounds and in the pavilion, but of course it's also, well, at this point it's grown to I believe they refer to it as a country house hotel, but it's really grown to the point where it's beyond a bed and breakfast, but per our code, it started out as a bed and breakfast. At any rate, they've learned a little bit more building code-wise with regard to sprinklers, and it sounds like there was some work done by a previous owner that may not have been per all the necessary codes, and so they're kind of working through that at this point. So the bed and breakfast part may be delayed to some future phase of the project. So right now, they're looking at it as being, and there's a meeting scheduled later this week with the county and the developer there to hash out possibilities, I guess. Excuse me. So with the bed and breakfast use being deferred for a bit, they are talking about, they're exploring the idea of having something of a pub operating in the building, which will be a permitted use in the downtown business district. But they don't want to be a full-scale restaurant. We also have in the code a, let's see, social clubs and, where are we here? And private assembly halls. So it would function as a private assembly hall for things like wedding receptions or other large events. And again, this is all possible. Nothing formal has been submitted at this point, but at any rate, we've got some stuff that we need to be thinking about for this site because the code currently has an exemption for parking requirements for existing buildings within the downtown business district. When we were talking about a bed and breakfast, this would have been a special exception use, and parking is one of the 8 criteria the Board of Appeals has to look at. And the consensus for that would be, well, yes, an existing building is exempt, but that would be for a permitted use. This is a special exception use, so the Board of Appeals can require parking. That's kind of off the table right now. So now we're looking at permitted uses and an existing building. So parking is a big question mark for the site right now. I believe it will ultimately require a site development plan because there will be a higher intensity of use than was the case with it being a residence with an in-home business at the residence. So that's something that we're really going to have to figure out for ourselves, is how we want to look at this in terms of a site plan. Again, nothing has been formally submitted yet. They're still trying to come up with their initial, their phase 1 plan. Ultimately, they would like to do a building addition, which would trigger parking requirements. But they don't have enough space on the lot for the parking they think they would really need for that building addition. So at this point, more just for your consideration, be aware of it. It's coming in the not too distant future, I would imagine. Let's see. But I did want to make sure that you guys were in the loop on that because they have been doing some advertising for the site, even though it's nothing has been approved at this point. So next thing up was the city manager and I met with Ron and Lori Sewell, who own the tree farm at 3400 Harney Road. They had approached the city several years ago for annexation. And at that time, the city was not interested in annexing additional residential acreage. That proposal was also for a large standard subdivision, you know, and I think they were proposing to come in as R10,000. The Sewells are currently envisioning something a bit different, with that being something like a continuing care community along the lines of say, Carroll Lutheran Village, where there would be a number of different types of dwellings and possibly an assisted living facility all on the property. They're just kind of exploring feasibility ideas at this point, but they were looking also for any kind of feedback in terms of, you know, has the climate regarding annexation changed? Does the idea of, you know, this type of community as opposed to a standard residential community, you know, is that something that's looked at favorably, or so as I said, at this point they're kind of looking to get a little bit of feedback just in general terms, if to figure out if it looks like they have some feasibility to market the property for this kind of development, you know, is that something we would like to see? And, you know, ultimately it needs to go to the mayor and council as well, of course, since they would approve the annexation. But they're just looking for some feedback at this point. So if anybody has any ideas about annexations, any thoughts one way or the other, feel free to speak up and share them.
Well, then any hardship, continuously care or assisted living would be for the local fire department. You usually wouldn't have to worry about kids and school issues. And you really, in that type of setting, you wouldn't have the police issues as you would have normally in a residential area. But like I see, the only hardship would be on the fire company because of the EMS service.
And we've seen with Carol Vista that, you know, water and sewer usage really does tend to be low, which is what we were told, and, you know, that has kind of played out to be the reality of it. You know, so as far as city services, you know, water, sewer, pretty low demand. Police calls for service, probably, you know, anticipated lower than average. You know, and if it's developed as a, you know, as a community village, which is the way you would be able to get the assisted living in a residential district, it could be done as a, you know, more compact development, so you'd have less stormwater management, less stormwater runoff also. So there are some benefits to doing that type of an approach as opposed to a standard, you know, R10,000 type subdivision.
They got a good well out there too, though, don't they? Very good well.
Yes, yes, and that was the carrot that was dangled before us when they were proposing annexation several years ago.
Tremendous well.
How many acres are we talking about? I mean,
It's over 100.
Over 100
I don't
acres.
have the exact number.
Okay.
118.512 acres.
118.
I think that Taneytown could use a continuing care community much better than a residential area.
Are you talking from experience, George?
Well, whatever.
He's
you
thinking
know.
long-term plans for
Long
this.
term.
We need
I
that-
agree with you,
We need
George.
that care,
Yes.
kind of care much greater than a residential development.
Another 150 townhouses?
However, are they going to have, is it going to be a family-owned? We don't know that though, or is it going to be a community deal or something, you know?
Right, we have no
Yeah.
idea at this point. It's all very conceptual, and
Yeah.
as
And
I
the
said,
size of it and all that, you know?
right now they're not even sure. They're sort of testing the waters a little bit, you know, to see if the city is interested in annexation of the property.
I'm in favor of annexation of that property.
I am too.
So am I.
I would suggest that we're in favor of that, but I'd want to know then a lot about what they're going to do with it.
But also, where does that loop of the highway eventually hit?
It was coming
They
right
just
through
put
that
on them?
place.
I don't remember.
That
It's
was
just
why they
beyond
got
that.
out of an annexation, because the extension was going to go right through the middle of that
Was
property.
it?
I
Yeah.
thought it was going to go on just beyond them, just beside them.
Well, it was
Well, either
gonna-
way, we're open.
It was gonna take
We're
some
open to
land.
hear more about it.
Oh, yeah.
That's the zoning map, not the comp plan. I think it was called Worthington Boulevard, it used to be Worthington Palmport Flow Surveys. I think it did go across the Sewell property.
Yeah, it did, I know.
I didn't think so. I think it went beside it.
So, one concern I have regarding annexation of the entire parcel is that there are some dwellings along Harney Road here
Right.
that are in the county, as well as a couple other properties along.
That shouldn't hold it up.
Pike. So those people would need to consent to the annexation, as would the Harner Farm.
Why would they have to consent to the annexation?
Well, or we would need to annex in a way that we would not make an enclave out of those properties.
Oh.
Because
Yeah.
the
That should not have an effect on this.
runs out here where it would be contiguous with the,
Well, and
what
it,
was the Bean property, it's now Williams and Bean.
but it also crosses Harney Road.
And it, right, and it
Yeah.
also crosses Harney Road, so it's contiguous here.
Okay, so it would
to annex the
isolate
whole
those
property
properties.
Would create an enclave for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 properties, unless we only annexed a portion to leave basically an opening to the rest of the county through there, which would not be the ideal. I don't think we would want to bring the whole area in.
Yep.
But again, that makes it a much larger annexation,
Well, and-
much more potential for development.
The
It might
largest
help that-
property in that group is for sale now, and part of the selling is they're promoting how it can be annexed into the city.
Might help the development at that end of town, because that end of the town is actually somewhat dead.
So, I mean, there's certainly potential there, and as was done with the Bean property, where right now it's going to be Easy Does It Bar and Grill. Years ago was the Havilah Inn. Part of that annexation of that property, in the annexation agreement, it was specified that that was going to be age-restricted houses and a maximum of so many units.
Right, yeah.
So again, that's a negotiation between the mayor and council and the petitioner. There certainly is
Wasn't
the
that
ability
supposed
to move forward with it while ensuring that it develops as what's being pitched now.
Wasn't that property out there supposed to take 5 years to change the zoning of it? Where's that at? I haven't heard nothing about it since it started.
It's been over 5 years.
It's been a while.
The zoning did eventually get changed. When we did our 2010 comprehensive plan, that was revisited, and the county agreed to allow the zoning to change to the R10 and general business split that we had depicted. Part of the issue when it was annexed was that the rear part of the property was on the comprehensive plan as conservation, and the front part was commercial. And the annexation plan was to have the front part, a portion of that front of the site along 140 was still going to be a commercial, but also part of it was going to be R10,000. So the argument from the county was that it was not consistent with our own comp plan, and they were right. I mean, because it was conservation in the rear, and now we were saying it was going to be R10,000. But then when we updated their comprehensive plan, then it was conforming with the new comprehensive plan, and the county went ahead with the zoning waiver at that point. So it's now general business and R10. But as far as development, I hear from the property owner a couple times a year, just kind of putting out feelers for, how Carol Vista has done, if Carol Vista's built out, which now it is. I know he is still interested in moving forward, but I think he's still trying to make sure that he has a marketable plan before he moves ahead with it. So.
Okay.
The Board of Zoning Appeals was going to meet on the 21st, but that was the day the city office was closed because of the snowstorm. So the hearing was postponed. It has been rescheduled for April 11th. So we obviously don't have a verdict to share on that event. Let's see, we just got the grading completion for Carol Vista Phase 4, so they're winding down out there. And I do have a couple things that have just come up in the last couple days since the report went out to you guys. The top sheet on the chart there, I don't know if you can really see it too well from your vantage, but that's the Roberts Mill Run Stormwater Retrofit Project. That project is going to consolidate a number of small stormwater ponds into one large wet pond in part of meeting our NPDES requirement to retrofit facilities for 20% of our total impervious area. So this project gets us a little more than halfway there. And we have an agreement with Carroll County where we are co-permittees on the NPDES permit. And as part of that, the county is paying for the majority of the stormwater retrofit costs to the breakdown of 80% county, 20% municipalities. So all the municipalities, including Taneytown, are on board with the county with these retrofits. So as part of that agreement, the county is ensuring that at least half of our required impervious area will be retrofitted during the first permit cycle, which is 5 years. But the county will be on target to meet the whole 20% countywide. Actually, we're on target to be ahead of that at the end of the permit. So this is just an update. We're not going through the site plan process as we talked about previously. It's really more a public works project. But the county is managing this for us. So the reason I bring this to your attention is because the weir wall for the pond is being engineered to incorporate bridge abutments to be able to complete the O'Brien Avenue connection. So they've reconfigured things a little bit from where we were a few months ago because one of the adjacent properties, a residential property, that they were hoping to use a small portion of, at least in terms of a revertible construction easement, so they could have some disturbance on the property to do the bridge abutments on the, I guess it would be the northwest side of the bridge. That property is in foreclosure with USRDA, so it's unlikely that we're going to see permission granted to get any kind of construction easement on the property. So the bridge abutments on that side have been re-engineered. The cost goes up a little bit for it, but the crossing can still be made. And the plan is the county is basically doing the engineering for the entire bridge for us, but the abutments will be funded as part of the stormwater project, and the city will end up having to pay for the actual road construction portion to get O'Brien down to the bridge and then for the bridge deck itself. So that'll be before the city council in terms of capital improvement project, hopefully sooner rather than later. So it does look like we're making progress on getting that O'Brien connection as that stormwater project moves forward. So, and we just received that this morning.
Out of curiosity, do we already have all of the easements necessary to do that O'Brien?
We're still pursuing one property for an entity that no longer exists.
Is it this oddly
Okay,
shaped one that kind of juts right in the middle of what O'Brien would be, or?
It's the piece, if you are on the Roberts Mill side of O'Brien, on that dead end side, it's, if you go down to the dead end, it's the property immediately to your right, contiguous to the last house on the right. So there's one parcel there that was part of the Sarah's Choice development. It got replatted a couple times, and it's on the plats to be deeded to the city, but we do not have record that the deed was recorded. So Jay's working on that one, but we have all the other parcels.
But you say that's the one that, I guess, butts up to 41 O'Brien, which would be the last house
Yes.
on the right.
Yes.
What about the one after that, which kind of doglegs into?
That's ours.
We already have that one, okay.
What's the latest guess on the cost of that project?
Are you looking to make a donation?
I'm just looking at, I just want to hear what the guess is.
We're looking at roughly a $2 million project.
And that's for us to extend the road and put the deck on?
No, that's for the stormwater
Okay.
retrofit part. The extension of the road and the bridge deck, the county is working on getting us some engineering estimates on that. The rough guess at this point is $250,000 to $300,000 for the road work and the bridge deck. But again, that's very tentative. We don't have an engineer's estimate on it
That
yet.
seems really low.
That's a lot less than I heard before.
So, now that does not include the abutments.
I'm
That's
thinking of what it's
all
gonna cost the
basically
city.
Well, that's the number for the city.
right.
How
That,
much?
If that's the number, that's the number for
Right.
the city.
right. The city would be
250 something.
as part of the agreement that the city entered with the county. We're already paying a fee based on through our town-county agreement that we do every year with the county. That basically is, here are the services that the county is going to provide, and here are the services the city provides that the county doesn't have to, and then there's a financial offset for it. So these stormwater retrofit projects are worked into that calculation. So through the town-county agreement, all the municipalities are paying into a fund that's then used to do these retrofit projects.
Are you
So-
talking about the balance from 250, 300,000 to 2 million? Is that what you're talking about?
Right.
That's right.
The stormwater part, the retrofit is expected to be roughly 2 million. In addition to that, there's another, say, 300,000 for the road work and the bridge. That 300,000 is not part of the stormwater agreement. That's part that the city will have to fund. We're already paying into a fund for the actual retrofit project, and the county is paying 80% of that. So if we were doing these projects on our own, it would be very, very
They wouldn't
ugly.
be happening.
Yeah.
So we're having a budget work session Wednesday,
Yep.
and then the budget's supposed to be introduced next Wednesday at the work session, at the city council's work session. And I had a brief conversation with the city manager about this today, because this would be a capital project, and we just had a retreat about capital projects, and this was not one of them. And there was a priority set about what everybody wanted, but now this is the priority because there's a timing issue. Of course, like if this doesn't get going by the end of the year, I wasn't told whether it's a fiscal year or a calendar year, but at the end of the year, then there's a problem. So the question that you have to kind of dice down on, and the councilman can do this, is what is the money paying for that we're going to do? Because, the city manager says it's for sidewalks on our portion. Is it for the bridge deck? I mean, it just seems a bridge and all the things we're talking about seems pretty cheap for $250,000.
It does.
Well, since we don't have to pay for the engineering, because that's a lot of the cost of this stuff is that engineering.
And that's the question, I guess, the strategy question, if you take away the money, is that by putting this off, even though it's all designed, what do you think would happen if we took it off the shelf 5 years or 10 years from now? Somebody's going to want to look at it and see if
You
you
have to
designed it
re-engineer
and
it.
built it right.
Well, I heard 250,000 5 years ago.
No inflation.
I heard more than that 5 years ago. A lot more.
I know.
So I think that decision is going to have to be made like in the next 6 weeks with the budget. And if you guys have an opinion on this, of whether the road should happen or not, it should probably be conveyed during that process.
Well, aren't we going to get a giant waterfall of HURs?
Well, the highway user fees are supposed to be reinstituted now, but you know, who knows?
Alrighty, so,
So planning commission, do we want the bridge?
Yeah, we
You wanna
do.
make that a
We
priority?
always wanted the bridge.
I gotta hear you say it if I'm
Why
gonna
do
go
we need-
before
why do we
council.
need
Always
the
wanted
bridge?
the bridge.
Why do we need the bridge?
Well, it's ridiculous. We have two
We do
O'Brien
need the
Avenues that
bridge.
don't
We
connect.
need to connect.
They need
We
to.
need to connect.
And since we
Why?
failed to make a
For the sa-
developer do
One
it.
thing, for safety issues.
Oh, baloney.
That's true. Oh, no, fire department?
That's baloney.
Absolutely. When you call the fire department and say, I have a fire on O'Brien Avenue, they need to figure out which part of O'Brien you're
Right.
Oh,
on.
that's been discussed years ago, that part of
And
it.
we still have the same issue.
Well, I know.
You get the bridge, I can't keep saying, well, it's a bridge problem.
We did, for
The
that
consensus,
kind of money,
I think
we
the
don't need
consensus
the
of us,
bridge.
yes.
Okay. I will bring it in as a priority that it needs to.
It is a priority, I think.
just a tad bit more detail on
I'm
that.
just being facetious.
I know, you have your manhole. What are you worried about?
That's right.
In our discussions with county staff this morning, we talked about the benefit of bidding it in conjunction with the retrofit project, because we may have a contractor that wants to bid on both, so the bid spec may be developed with basically a second phase to do the road work and the bridge deck, so that we may have one contractor who will bid to do both phases, and then we don't have to pay for duplicate mobilization costs, and they'll have equipment on site already and likely have a lower cost for the road work and the bridge work. Because really, if we're looking at a $2 million project and then phase two is a, say, $300,000 project, there definitely should be some cost savings by bidding it as one project in two
If it is
phases.
that.
So that, at this point, that's where we would like to see it go, but of course it does need to go before the mayor and council before any final decisions, and we are waiting for some engineering estimates so that we can present a figure that we're reasonably confident in for the budget workshop. Okay, the last thing that I had to kind of piggyback onto my report, again, was since the report was printed and went out, is the George Farm, which lies partially within the city's growth area boundary.
Is building a lot of houses, I think.
And again, let's see, this property is the George property. There's a segment here that's within our growth area boundary as what would equate to our 20,000 residential. The family is pursuing ag preservation for the property, and when this was added to the growth area in 2010 plan, there was some discussion as to, at the time there was some development interest in the parcel. The developers from, I believe the developers from Carol Vista were pitching the idea of adding that farm to the growth area.
Also a golf course.
Right.
Okay, some of you remember.
We do, yeah.
He forgets nothing.
And 100,000 gallons of water from our sewer plant back.
Okay. So, at any rate, we're still a few months away from getting to our water resources element in the comprehensive plan and really drilling down on the land use map and such. But if there's any thoughts one way or the other about that property going into ag preservation, as I said, a portion of the property is considered within our growth area.
Once it goes in there, it's hard to get it out,
You can't get it out, basically.
right?
I mean,
And
you have
it has
to,
It's in.
short of selling your firstborn child, you're not
Right.
getting it out of ag premise.
So that probably would be locked in.
Right.
So
So
I think we should really talk
Oppose it.
about this a lot before.
Okay. So you would rather, okay, so I'll just get back to the ag pres folks that you would rather
Right.
discuss it more thoroughly as we get to that portion of the plan.
Agreed, guys?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Yes.
the road supposed to go through there?
And that was part of the discussion at
Yeah.
the time, was Antrim Boulevard, one of the alignments,
Thank
well,
you, Loop.
actually, I guess because it is fairly close to the current terminus of Antrim Boulevard at Trevanian, the county owns the parcel that's immediately behind the Windy Hills development. And they have, basically they purchased that to help preserve that alignment, that right-of-way. There's a portion of, I believe it's the Selby Farm, that's right on Trevanian Road, the first farm past the Windy Hills development. Not the Flying Colors of Success property, but the farm adjacent to that. That Antrim Boulevard would cut a corner of that off. And then it would cross the Oler property, which is adjacent to the George property. And I believe, if I recall correctly, the discussion about the George property was, well, you want development potential on both sides of the new road to have some payback, you know, and provide services and you know, for the cost of the road. I think that was kind of the logic of adding that portion to the growth area. But I don't think there was appetite to add the whole property. So we'll hash that over as we move forward, but I'll get back to the Ag Pres folks that you'd like to think about that before providing any official opinion. So, okay.
But
And
the
that was,
water tower was also considered maybe over in that area too, right? A new water stand?
That was considered for the, I believe, the property the county owns.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of behind the Flying Colors of Success and the Windy Hills.
That's a good place to put it, I thought.
Yeah, that's a good elevation and was identified as a good potential site for a new water tower or standpipe. Okay, so sorry to throw a couple things that weren't in the written report, but the last few days actually have been rather eventful. So, okay, that pretty much wraps it up. I don't know if you want to go right into other active projects.
Might as well. You're next.
Nope, we already talked about the LP Enterprises site plan and Meadowbrook. Meadowbrook Section 4A and B, they built 4 more houses, so they're chugging along, and we do have a potential time frame within which to accept the infrastructure, to accept the roads and water and sewer and everything. And some of that is going to be contingent on the number of use and occupancies that are completed by that date. So we're keeping track on that. Creekside, the transformer's been moved. I did receive an as-built drawing that shows that the transformer pad and the transformer are within the prescribed easement area. There were some concern from the homeowner on that corner lot, and it really couldn't get much closer to the limits of the easement, but it is in. So that's been a long-standing issue for the project. So that's done. They're still awaiting, I guess, final green light from State Highway to build the sidewalk along Baltimore Street. So everything is lined up for that. But they don't have the final go-ahead. Nothing really new on Carol Vista Phase 4.
They're finished, aren't they?
They've pulled the last building permit. I think they have some, I don't know if the gates are up at the entryway yet.
We talked about that last month.
Yeah, I think that's still to be completed. So they have, I mean, the houses are all built. There are 2, as of a couple weeks ago, the builder was in the office to modify a permit, and and I think they had two that had not gone to settlement. They had one, they were actually coming in to do a finished basement for it, which was not part of the original permit. And I'm not sure if that was to make it more marketable or if they had someone interested, but that potential buyer wanted the finished basement. But the houses are constructed, but there are a couple that haven't been sold yet. George's New York is continuing to chip away. I haven't really heard a whole lot from them recently, other than they're waiting for the asphalt plants to open so they can do their paving over there. And Meads Crossing has been kind of quiet this month as well. So I think that's about it.
Okay.
I wanted to give you the update on the small cell situation. Remember I talked to you about that, and that the city had passed the zoning changes and the site plan changes so that at least they would get reviewed, and then we were working on a whole chapter to deal with the specifications of what these things could be. And I thought it was going to be simple. We'd give it to the engineer, they'd give us something back, and we'd pass it. Well, they gave us this 96-page, very technical read that you have to go through. So we're going through that. Meanwhile, the industry put a bill in Annapolis this session which basically said that they would be exempt from all local control, local planning, local zoning, local everything. So if they wanted to come in front of somebody's house, in front of a right-of-way, and put up a pole 100 feet high, they could do it. So there was an outrage for that. You probably saw the Councilman Vigliotti wrote something in the paper about that. I mean, the whole 9 yards. And the proponent of that was the chairman of the Finance Committee in the Senate, which is a powerful spot. I mean, that could have happened. So what they did, instead of move the bill forward, is he withdrew the bill for summer study. What that means is they'll put a panel together and they'll talk about it over the summer, meaning that they'll hear everything out and then try to start it again next year. So the goal of the local governments is everybody try to pass their regulations between now and the summer study, so that when we go to summer study, you can say, we have these, nobody's even asked us to come here. If they've asked us, it's worked and nobody's complained. That way there's no need for the state to step in and regulate. So it's changed a lot from where it was last fall, where I told you we needed the state to give us authority. After everybody cracked the books open, they said, well, we kind of have the authority. Well, then the state wanted to take it away. So we need to act. The council says, yes, we need to act, but it's just a matter of, it's a huge amount of volume. So our goal should try to be to get this thing, in by the summer, so by June 30. And I'd like to give you copies as we come forward so you can look at it, but it's a super, super technical read. It is not a fun time to read it. So, but that's the status.
Good then. Claire, do you have any?
I just want to let you know that the draft annual report should be in your hands sometime within the month coming up for your review, and then we'll ask for acceptance letter. I think that's in May, if I believe that's right. I'll be back to my data. That's it.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything to bring before the commission? George?
Is that a visitor back here?
Excuse me?
Do you have a visitor here?
I just opened it to the floor, no comments, so, George? Or,
I'm here tonight to find out what's going on, basically, because my home sits at 404 O'Brien. If I understand, they're supposed to start the road through there sometime in the near future. I want to get some kind of idea in regards to when that was supposed to happen, to start that next area. I think that's 5, they call it, Area 5, or something like that. And when that's supposed to actually happen, do you have
Jim?
any kind of idea in regards to that?
Yep, that was pretty much the first order of business tonight, and once the last couple approval letters are received for that Phase 5 portion, the lots can be recorded, and then the developer will enter into a public works agreement with the city. It'll be pretty much a rehash of what they did with the phase they're working on now. So Once that's all in place, they'll be able to apply for a grading permit, so they probably will be able to start construction later in the spring. To be able to start putting the, do the grading and then start putting the water, sewer, and storm drains in as weather permits.
So we're talking about activity in regards to anything going on as far as that block is concerned in like around June or something like that, July?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, once the, let's see, I would expect the last couple approvals to come in the next couple of weeks. At that point, it's kind of dependent on the developer, how quickly he wants to move forward with executing the public works agreement. That does go before the mayor and city council. Basically, that'll say, you know, the developer is going to build this and this and this, and he's going to put this much money up front to make sure he does it right and everything. Once that gets done, the plans go and they get recorded through the county through development review. They'll record them at the courthouse or the records office. Once that's done, the developer can apply for a grading permit to start pushing dirt around. They'll set up the perimeter controls, the like erosion and sediment control fences and that sort of thing. But once they get the grading permit from the county, they're free to start construction activity. Usually that starts with overall a mass grading of the whole Phase 5 area. And then they need to stabilize the parts that they're not going to be working with for more than, I don't remember off the top of my head how many days they have to let it sit without working it, but so it kind of depends on how quickly the developer wants to move with it.
That pretty much answers my question. One of the basic questions is to the board here. What I understand when I first was around about 14 years ago, and still maybe understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, because of Carroll County, they would like to keep it as much as possible natural, nature-wise, so on and so forth. And there seems to be a lot of building that's been going on around here. In the near future, do you expect any other projects to be going on of this magnitude to build more as time goes on?
Jim, would you like to answer that? I mean, other than what we just talked about a couple minutes ago.
Well, I think obviously next big project is going to be just north of Meadowbrook, which is going to be Meads Crossing. And that's right now the only large project in the foreseeable future.
That's on the books already.
Right, that's on the books. Right, the only, in that area, no. I think once Meadowbrook and Meads Crossing are done, I don't know that there's going to be anything else to do up there. The only other option is going to be south of town, and even that's kind of a pipe dream at this point. Yeah. But Meads Crossing is incorporating a lot of the more natural elements in it, just kind of preserve that whole, I mean, granted, it's a lot of houses, but they're keeping a lot of trees and walking trails and the creek that runs through it. So yeah, we're still trying to stay true to that idea.
So the Meads Crossing development that they're referring to is at the end of where Crimson Avenue dead ends.
Right.
Currently, that ultimately will continue up to Angel Road, and that's the Meads Crossing subdivision is this parcel that's going to back up to the houses along Bowie Mill Road, or Bowie Mill Avenue. This little section here is going to be a forest conservation area where the existing woods are off Animal. You can probably see them from here.
Right, exactly.
Right, so that will stay woods, but then the rest of Meadowbrook, is going to fill in basically this area. Phase 5 is going to probably do, I guess,
About
up to
that.
there,
Yeah.
and then Meadowbrook will have one phase left that eventually connects up to the last phase of the Copperfield subdivision here. But these hash areas are in agricultural preservation, so they will not develop. It's very unlikely they will develop. I don't know if these are, some of the older ag easements had essentially a buyout clause. I think it was structured to make it very difficult to buy out, but there was an opportunity in some of the older ag easements. Now they're all perpetuity. But I don't know if these were, older ones that may have that buyout option, but it's unlikely that they'll be developed. But without looking up or contacting the county ag pres people, I don't know if, the details of those specific ag easements. There will be a lot of houses in the remainder of these kind of orange areas there. And the other property that Mr. Wance was referring to is down here in the Mountain Brook Farms property. We saw a concept years and years ago for a development there, but it never really moved forward. I guess just in general kind of comments of the
Well, one question right off the top of my head, because as time goes on, you're doing all this building, you're gonna have a lot more people coming here, you're gonna have a lot more traffic, et cetera, so on and so forth.
Right.
Have you planned anything in regards to how to deal with all this traffic?
That was all part of the kind of site plan processes involved in all this, is what kind of impact it's going to have on the different areas. 194, Meadowbrook, all of those different things. So all of that was taken into account,
The
yes.
state gets that.
Yeah, and we do traffic studies when these developments come in like that. It's always a traffic study.
Right.
Because it's very busy now as is, so it's like, I remember how Westminster used to be years ago, and it's like, almost like Baltimore, and it seems like this area is gonna be almost like Westminster is gonna be. And the whole reason why I moved from Long Island to here is because it had more of a country feel, suburbia kind of thing, and that seems to be dissipating.
Well,
That's why I'm asking these questions.
It's everywhere.
Well,
It's
yeah.
everywhere.
And I absolutely hear what you're saying. The good thing I can tell you, especially on your side of town, up on that northern part, is across 194 is where Bollinger Park is going.
Right.
And that's going to be kind of our flagship nature park. It's not going to have athletic fields. It's not going to be a high drive area like the other parks. It is going to be a nature park. So that's kind of how we're counterbalancing the high density Meads Crossing with that very nature oriented park across 194 from it.
Okay.
So we're kind of building those protections around the area as we see these increases.
Okay, well, I just know for a fact, pretty much you're gonna have a lot of traffic.
Okay.
Right.
Nothing was about that, that's all I can say.
We got a lot of
One
traffic already.
notable thing that you'll be seeing when the crossing does develop is the state will likely be coming in and adding a turn lane to 194 at the square here to reduce some of the congestion. Because with the additional traffic from the remainder of Meadowbrook and then Meads Crossing, that the intersection here is projected to be at a failing level of service. And adding the turn lane, because traffic stacks up because people can't turn left.
Right.
And so that turn lane is proposed to be the mitigation to get the traffic flowing through there a little bit better. So we ultimately will be losing some parking spaces along, in the downtown Wednesday.
Well, welcome to
It's coming.
Tonytown. Welcome to Tonytown.
And progress.
Right, yeah,
Did you say you've been here 14 years?
yeah. I
14.
think I'll be here a lot longer, I'll be quite honest with you.
Yeah. George, you have anything?
It's too much traffic for me, too many people.
Brad, do you have anything?
But thank you anyway. Joe.
Thank you, sir.
No, I don't have anything.
No, sir, I have nothing for you.
Just one question. The large garage that went in outside the service station, was that permittable or no?
Large garage.
Yeah, there where Rob's service center is.
Where?
They dug it in and put it in.
I need to take a look at that. I noticed that this
It's
weekend.
been dug in and put in and
It looks like they've taken one of their storage sheds that they sell
on the Westminster
and
side.
that they're using one as part of the service center. At least that's what
Yes.
it looked like when I
yeah.
drove by this weekend. I happened to notice that.
Oh, they
So-
snuck one by you, didn't they?
So I need to.
This
go-
wasn't a
go chat
small
with
one
them.
either. This was the biggest.
Right.
And you may recall they had talked about adding a bay to the building some
That's a
time
bay.
ago.
That's the
And,
day.
and I have a feeling that this is their under the radar way of trying to do that. So I need to get out
They
there.
got a for sale sign on it, so
Yeah, I need to get out there one day when the door is up and
Okay.
see what's going on with that. But thank you, that's on my radar screen.
Looks like the next meeting would be April the 30th. So I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.